Hello, and welcome to Leadership as a Philosophy, Not a Checklist, Book Discussion 10. And this is going to be on Letters to a Young Jazz Musician by Wynton Marsalis. Now, couple things about this. This book was not originally on my plan. This is the first Audible that I've made on my entire year-long plan. The book that I did have, I reread it and I was so frustrated and upset with it that I decided that I could not do a good review of it because it was mostly incorrect. And that's not the purpose of this first year. It's more to show examples of great leadership that are not from traditional type leaders. I've been following Wynton Marsalis, not following, I've been observing, listening to Wynton Marsalis for many years, mostly from his jazz for young people concerts or education things that he was doing at the Lincoln Center. And I was listening to that on a satellite radio network, not to be named. And I always loved it. I just thought it was amazing. And then I don't know, it probably was June or July, so almost a year ago, I was just searching around and saw something that he had done with an Australian TV station, or maybe it was a radio station, 2 years ago, maybe 2019. And 17 or 20-minute interview. I'll try to remember to link it in the video for this, or in the description for this video. But he's sitting there talking away, and all of a sudden I was going, wait a minute. He's talking like a leader, because he was hardly ever taking credit for anything. Every time he talked about his band or a group or anybody he was working with, he was, well, how do I make sure that they get to showcase their talent? How do I make sure they get to do this? And so then I bought his autobiography, or a book about him, and then this book. The autobiography is fine, but when I read this book, it about melted my brain, because it's a leadership book. But what's so amazing about it is it describes how leadership feels. And this is the fifth time that I've tried to remake this video, and I got it wrong every time because I was trying to be something I wasn't, and sound all grandiose and whatever. But this describes what jazz feels like. I mean, jazz, of course. So it's a book about jazz. Describes what leadership feels like. So you walk in the room, you've got all these different people with all these different talents and abilities, and you get them creatively together to do something. Well, that's jazz. It's also leadership, right? So, the saxophone player calls out sick. Well, maybe we can do something with two trumpets. I don't know. Maybe we get a flute over here. Who knows? It might work. It might not. But there's no prescribed formula for leadership on a daily basis. There's the philosophy. There's a philosophy for jazz. And that's what he talks about, is a bunch of philosophy. So if you were to replace jazz with leadership, or an organization's activities, and the players with employees, or the instruments with employees. I don't want to think of employees as inanimate objects, but the players of the instruments. So that's the players of their talent. So the musicians are the employees, and jazz is the organization. It's leadership. So super happy to do this, super excited about it. I hope that you all enjoy it, and I highly encourage that you go get the book. I have said it before, or maybe I haven't said it before. This is one of those books where if you read it and get it, you're obviously a musician. But if you'll know if you've got leadership ability or not, because this stuff will make sense. You go, oh yeah, that's interesting. Oh yeah, right. If you're a technician, you might read it and go, I have no idea what's going on, because there's no steps here. There's no checklist. So this is an excellent book for that. And I'm stunned that it's not on more reading lists. So anyway, enough of that. I'm going to proceed right to the PowerPoint portion of the video. Have a great day. So welcome to the PowerPoint presentation of book discussion 10, which will be on, as we talked about, To a Young Jazz Musician by Wynton Marsalis. Now, This is the 5th time that I've tried to do this video, and I was unhappy with them every time. I finally figured out why, so hopefully this one gets the point across. The reason that this book had such an impact on me is because when I read it, I thought, well, this is what leadership feels like. So reading a book written by a jazz master where he's giving lessons to a hypothetical young kid about how to be the best at jazz and the best at being an individual, it could just absolutely be written down to where instead of saying jazz and playing with the group, you put down leadership. And when it comes to the instrument, you could call that a person, although a person is not an instrument, but the things he wants to be extracted are super similar. And so if you want to see, I've been thinking this idea. So if you want to know if you're a natural leader or not, read this book. Because if it makes sense, you're a leader. If you look at it and go, what the heck is this guy talking about? Then you're not. Or if it just completely puzzles you. And as I said, I'm so happy that I decided to go with this book instead of the one that I had planned for this month, because the one for this month was so annoying that I figured all it would sound like because I was being super critical of the author, and that's not my intention. We're here to learn about leadership. So I'm glad that I changed this because this absolutely made everything worthwhile. So we're going to go through some stuff real quick. So here's the titles of the chapters in the book. One of my other videos, I tried reading sections from the chapters, but it just became a mess because I was waxing entirely too poetic with insufficient vocabulary. So not a great thing to do. Anyway, the humble self, humility, right? A human thing. Hey, cool. We're talking about instruments, but humans. Talking rules and singing freedom. So the theme behind that chapter is that you have to have a structure to operate in. If everything is chaos, then everything is chaos. And so you have to operate within some sort of a structure. So to hear a jazz person talk about some structure, it's fascinating because you would think that a jazz player, a jazz musician would be, let's just be as nutty as possible. But he does a really great job in here talking about how too much chaos or breaking a rule just to break it is not the greatest thing. That's something that I think about all the time. Somebody comes up and says, we need to change this. Why? Well, because. Because why? What are we going to improve by changing this rule? And if it's nothing's going to improve, then maybe the rule stays. Maybe it doesn't. But you have to have a structure because then you can operate. It's like anytime that I give somebody a guidance, it's like, here's the left, here's the right, you can't go this low, you can't go here or here, go. And so what's there? All of this and up. And it always ends up being better. So love that chapter. Playing jazz. Hey, talking about jazz. The arrogance of position. I love it. Right? What do we talk about all the time? Just because you're the leader of whatever team or department absolutely means that you're probably not the best worker in that department. Right? If you were the best worker in that department, they shouldn't have put you in a leadership position unless you're good at that too, which is rare. But are you going to get so proud of yourself thinking that you're God's gift that you stop being stop having humility, stop being human, stop playing jazz, right? Who keeps the gate? Oh, that's a good one. Because it basically says who's in charge of saying what's what. And so who is it that's going to determine what is jazz and what's not? Who's going to determine what's good and what's not? Well, just like I said, replace that term with leadership. So who is it that's telling us what leadership is and isn't? And then look at the results. That to me is the biggest thing that you can do. Just look at the evidence. Are we actually getting what we expect out of all of these high-paid, high-powered leaders? Music and morals. Self-explanatory. Same thing, though. Talk about morals and leadership all the time. Moving it forward, the new thing. So that kind of goes back to, or it sounds similar to talking rules and singing freedom. It's, hey, I've got the historical, I've got the canon, right? I've got the body of work that's all of jazz and all of leadership. And that doesn't mean you have to play the exact same things. Maybe there's going to be tastes change, stuff changes a little bit, but you still have to support the canon of jazz. And so, yeah, you might come out and try something new, but you have to make sure that you're being respectful of the old stuff. If you're trying some new, completely radical thing, I mean, let's just say somebody decided to go play Mary Had a Little Lamb. Well, I guess they could make that jazz. I'm trying to think, trying to make something that's the most stale music you could possibly imagine, and then do some flippant categorical thing on it and suddenly say, well, this is the new jazz. And you're going, no, it's not, right? Lone Man on the Prairie, that means that sometimes you might be the only person that's got the right idea. And if you're convinced it's the right idea and you're not damaging stuff, then you have to be the one that keeps pushing for it. You've got to be the one, because he talks about a bunch of the jazz pioneers that people thought they were out of control or they were crazy, but that person was convinced that they were doing the right thing. I love this because every so often doing this project, I have had some negative feedback where people have said, what you're talking about can't happen. Well, it has happened, because everybody knows what leadership environments they've been in that were good, or organizations that they've been in that were good. So we need to replicate that. So I'm going to keep going just because of reading that chapter. You know, like I said, even I got something out of this book when I was reading it going, yes, yes, yes. Dancing with Joy, you know, if you're not having a good time being in charge, don't. The thing that I really found interesting about this, I just forgot who. In one of these chapters, he talks about the fact that, I think it might be a Lone Man on the Prairie. He talks about some of the great jazz musicians were so consumed by trying to do what they were going to do that they had all of these other catastrophic problems because nobody around them was helping them understand what they were doing, or helping their outlet, or doing something. And so it's that yes, you're the lone person. Are you still having fun doing it? And that's why I talk about leaders need to take a break. If you're actually a leader and you're actually doing everything the right way, it takes a lot out of you. It drains your soul. So you got to go refresh and refill. Otherwise, you become arrogant. You become stale. You lose your humility, right? You get to the point where you think you can't get any better, and then you just stop. It happens to everybody, right? So those are the titles of the chapters. Absolutely recommend this book because, like I said, you read it and you think that you're a leader, and it makes perfect sense to you. You're a leader. All right, so great point. So these are some of the points. Oh, I messed up my header. I'm sorry. It'll show up in a minute. What did we talk about going through this entire philosophy on leadership? Just because you've sent somebody to school and taught them the steps, they're not a leader. And he says the exact same thing. People going to Jazz U come out and can play all the notes and can play all the scales, but they can't play. They can't swing. They can't participate in jazz. They just come out and can do really fast and fancy runs and all this sort of stuff, but they're not playing jazz. There's no soul, right? I know that it's the highest selling jazz album of all time, but a lot of Miles Davis's stuff, the better stuff is the least popular. But Kind of Blue, which is the top selling jazz album ever, he went in there with his band and had some ideas, and they riffed off of those ideas. And in the record, there's mistakes and there's errors and there's notes that are quite incorrect and all that sort of stuff, but it's still unbelievably amazing. Why? Well, because it's natural. It's real. It's not fake. Could you say that it was technically perfect? That it was every note precise? Oh, So just because you're a technical expert does not equal jazz or leadership. And he goes on, there's a whole chapter about that. It's, I think it's The Humble Self. Because he talks about coming out of school and saying, I can do all this stuff. And he talks about when he was a kid and he was able to show off. And he went up and was playing in New York, I think. And And people were looking at him like he was useless because he was just being fancy, but he wasn't swinging. All right, so amazing, right? So this is out of the book, The Art of Swing. So he talks about swing, in which if you listen, if you want to have a great introduction or appreciation or understanding of jazz, go listen to Jazz for Young People, which was him in the Lincoln Center in the early 2000s. I was listening to it on a satellite radio network over the years, and I went to buy the whole collection, and it's expensive, but I'm tempted. I may, at some point, if this project becomes something, then I may end up buying that. Just because it was so great, because he breaks down, here's what's going on, and here's how you swing, and he plays stale and plays the swing, and it's when things are alive and vibrant and living, and you know that stuff's working. You go into work. This is the leadership version of swing. You walk in, and you feel that there's some crisis brewing, and you walk over and look, and you see that the people that you would have expected to do what they're supposed to do are doing it, and they're doing it well, and they're doing it, maybe it's a little rough around the edges, but they're doing fine. And then you say, well, I don't need to do that anymore. And as you're walking along, you look over here, and here's somebody that's trying their hardest and needs some help, and so you walk over there and help them out a little bit, and you do this, and it's just this flow. And so everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, and you're helping fill in the blanks and all that sort of stuff. He talks about in the YouTube video I referenced during the introduction, he talks about, he's making sure that everybody in the band, when he's playing, or in the group, is getting a solo, and he sometimes forgets what he's supposed to be doing because he's worried about everybody else. That's leadership, right? There's this, you can feel when things are going right. You can't measure it. I've used the example before. The boss calls, hey, what have you done today? I had some coffee. And they go, you're lazy and useless. Well, if you're a genuine leader and you've worked to train your team, and they're all doing the right thing, and all of the subordinate leaders are doing the right thing, and everybody's doing their job, you don't have anything to do but go around and check on stuff. And so that's the problem, right? And in jazz, what if he's sitting there playing along and goes, man, I really want to, well, you know what? This has been going so well, I don't want to interrupt it with my trumpet. Wynton Marsalis being a trumpet player, or a horn, as he calls it. I love it. Maybe I should just let that flow go. It's perfect. Everything's moving along. All I'm going to do is interrupt it just to interrupt. Well, that's not swinging, right? That's not jazz. Sometimes everything's working and you don't have to do anything. Sometimes not doing something is the right thing to do. Like I said, I read this and I was just, I very rarely write in books. And in this one, I've got notes and exclamation points and stars and wow and all of this, in the margins. It's so good. Have an objective when practicing or playing, when leading, right? You don't just, a leader by themselves out in the middle of a cornfield, nothing's going to happen. Suddenly you get 15 people and say, hey, we need to weed all of this corn. Okay, suddenly we got a plan and how we're going to do some stuff. So, there's no need to walk around being bossy if there's nothing to be bossy about. But have an objective when you're practicing. Hey, what are we trying to get out of this? You got to give people a focus. It's not a specific thing. Hey, this is the general idea I would like to get out of this. Miles Davis with Kind of Blue. He's got the flamenco sketches. He's got the Kind of Blue. He's got some of the other albums that, this is a G-rated channel, so I don't want to say anything. But exactly, right? I mean, just take these examples and use them for leadership. So then, what do we talk about? The characteristics, the 4 pillars, the philosophy. I'm still wrestling with what we're going to call that. So humility, always learn. Never think that you're the most important thing. That's the humble self, right? And he talks about that a lot, but several times he says, you go around thinking you're the coolest thing, there's somebody better that's going to knock you out. And so if you're always being humble, then nobody's ever going to expect anything less of you or anything else. Integrity, don't BS. He says that all the time. It's like, don't fake it. Don't play something that's not genuine. Don't do something that's not right, right? In a leadership position, everybody knows if you have humility, integrity, empathy, and vigilance. Everybody knows when you're lying or when you don't support something. There's been several times where I've said, look, the reason that we are doing this is because I was told this is the new requirement. All of you know how I feel about this, but I'm going to do what the boss said. We're going to do what the boss said. So that's what's going to happen. And I know all of the objections that you have because we already know that I have those objections. Well, you're still doing it, but you have the integrity to tell the truth. There's other times where I've said, if anybody comes down here or comes over here to ask this question, here's the answer that you give them. But we're going to do this. Now, how do I get away with that? It's because I had bad leaders that weren't checking. This happened several times when I was in the military, for sure. People come over, what are you guys doing? Blah, 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 parrot, 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 pop, 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 pop. Great. They walk off. What we were doing didn't make a bit of sense. And so I didn't make my people do it. That's integrity, right? But like I said, sometimes when you know that people are going to come and check for sure, then you have to do that. Vigilance. Pay attention to yourself. Pay attention to your audience. Pay attention to the band members. He talks about that several times, right? Suddenly, you're in a room and you're playing for 15 people and you want to play this and nobody's digging it. You're not swinging. And so then you find out what makes the audience start moving around a little bit, and then you play that. Well, that's the same thing when you're a leader. You come in there talking one way, and nobody's hearing it. Well, you have to get the same message across. You just have to do it in a different way. You got to translate that. And so, you have to watch, because sometimes, I've used an example, or maybe I haven't said this example. I have a problem. The way I like to be rewarded is I either like to not be talked to at all or told, hey, your team did a great job. Not me, right? Your team did a really good job. That to me is the best reward ever. Well, in the last job that I had, where I was in charge of people, I thought, hey, you're getting a paycheck. That's good. If you do something exceptional, then I'm going to say you did something exceptional. But if you did your job requirements, I don't need to tell anything. You're getting paid. That's good. And some people complained about it. So what I have to do, I had to make sure that I went around and said, hey, that was a really good, you just did a very solid, excellent execution of what was expected of you. Good job. That's the standard now. You can't go below that. I always was trying to improve. But I had to change what I was saying for the audience, right? And then empathy. You have to feel when the swing or the flow is changed. If something's not right. Why is the band not vibing? Am I flat? Am I having a problem? Am I not enjoying what I'm doing? What's going on with the audience? You got to feel all that sort of stuff. But he talks about it. You got to feel it. You have to pay attention. Don't lie. Always be humble and paying attention. But then you have to watch all of those things, all of them together. It's not a checklist, right? If you go and look at the Army manuals where it says at certain times you're going to have to know when to have integrity. All the time. When are you going to have to pay attention? All the time. When are you going to have empathy? All the time. It just depends. You might have to, there's going to be some significant event where where your integrity is being tested, but you still have to have all the other characteristics. So how does this equate, right? So the swing is the talent, because you can send somebody to be a technician and they can come out and they still can't play jazz. So that's the swing, right? If you don't have humility, then you're going to be stuck on yourself and you're not going to swing. You're going to think you're just the technical expert. If you have integrity, you're out there playing something and I'm just repeating somebody else's notes. Right? That's a problem. And then, so here's the leadership examples. So like I said, grab this book, read it, and if it makes sense to you and you say, oh man, that's cool. Because he doesn't explain to you how to swing. He says, here's what's important about being able to swing. And so I just love it. I'm so happy that I took the chance. Now, one little side note that's kind of that I find fascinating is that this guy worked with Leonard Bernstein at, oh, I just forgot the name of the stupid, oh, the academy where Bernstein taught at. But he worked with him, as did Marin Alsop, right? Remember the very first video that we did about leadership, as did a guy named Michael Thielson Thomas. Now, what do those three people have in common as far as conductors go of great music? So Leonard Bernstein mentored them, and Marin Alsop wanted to go start the Orchids thing, so she's taking care of the inner city kids and making sure they've got access to music. Michael Thielson Thomas went and did this great big huge thing with the San Francisco Symphony. They had family days, and then he did this whole video series breaking down great orchestral pieces. And then Wynton Marsalis, they went jazz for young people. So what is that? Mentorship. Now, my stupid butt forgot to put a bullet in here about that, but that's one thing that Wynton Marsalis talks about all the time is that, hey, we get all these great old jazz people, and they get a little bit older, and then all they do is start chasing a hit, which is what? Chasing the money, trying to become famous, trying to become all this exceptional stuff, and they don't pass on what they've learned, their wisdom, to the younger generation. Well, it's the same stinking thing with leadership, right? So here's Leonard Bernstein mentoring these great conductors and leaders, whatever. I don't know if you have a jazz conductor. Sure, jazz conductor. But he mentors these three people, and they go out and they're mentoring thousands and thousands of people, teaching them the music. And are they doing it for fame and a bunch of money? No. You can tell they're doing it because they love it and they want people to learn. It's the same thing with leadership. I said it before, right? Go find everybody. When I was younger, and I never understood it, said, go find a mentor. So how do you interview a mentor? I don't know, right? I'm just going to go find somebody that's famous and popular and ask. And I did. I was asking people that were superior to me. Hey, I'd like to spend some time asking you some questions. Shut down. Hey, I'd like to learn. Shut down. Well, so where's the gap? Well, the problem is the leaders need to identify who in their pool has the leadership ability and then go mentor them. Now, in this current politically correct HR nightmare, it's like, oh, that person's special. Who cares? If the person has leadership ability, go mentor them and help develop it and grow them. Otherwise, you're missing out on all of that talent. I had a phrase I said all the time. It's never pass up a chance to make somebody around you better. If you know something that they're doing that they can work on, if you're in charge, right? You don't want to run picking on everybody. But mentorship, right? And he talks about that in here too with jazz, and I left it off. I apologize. So that's the book. This book is what leadership feels like. And that's the problem I was having when I was trying to do the videos. I kept trying to read it and go, yes. And I said, well, what am I describing? It's describing the swing. Because I said it in the intro, I'll say it again. I started saying about 15 years ago, said leadership is like jazz, but with people instead of instruments, even though there's people in jazz. But what I meant was it's the same idea. So here's, what are we going to get out of this saxophone? What are we going to get? Well, the person playing the saxophone, but it's the same thing. Leadership is jazz, but with people. Right. So here's the book, published 2004. I think it was October 12th, but that's not, I got it in paperback and published by Random House. And as always, I am not sponsored by any of these people. If anybody has any clout, I would love to interview or talk to Wynton Marsalis about this or ask him about it. But, all these people are more famous than anybody, and I'm navel-lint, so they're never going to find out about this. But excellent, worthwhile. I highly encourage it. And it's a short read. It's like 130, 140 pages. And small book, so it's not like it's this big tome. All right. As always, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your consideration. I'm sorry it's been so long since my last review. Like I said, I've been redoing this one so many times that it was starting to make me crazy, but I think this is the essence of it. So, have a great day.